Katrina, you're the one who brought up to me. You wanted to scan these photos.
Yes. We have a plethora of photo albums, and I have like 10 scrapbooks that are full of finished pages with no pictures, because pictures are hard.
There's my Christina. There she is, playing with her sisters.
I lost track of where I was going. It's distracting even seeing them. Over time, I've gone over the stages of grief, but I don't believe even now that I necessarily accept her death. I needed to hold someone accountable for her death.
We all knew something bad just happened to her. This isn't natural. So we investigated, bought books, and learned as much as we could.
This is like a travesty of justice.
September 29th, 2014, it just, is that even a real day? I don't know. I think the whole day stands out. It just seems surreal.
I just think of the song, The Day the Lights Went Out in Georgia. It was like the day the lights went out. Like, the world stopped September 29th, 2014. It halted and stayed there and is still there. I feel like the earth jolted on its axis and it's just stuck. My name is Katrina Sharon, and I am the middle sister to Christina Harris.
My name is Patricia Hutchinson, and I am the youngest sister of Christina Harris.
Christina is the oldest. I am 5 years younger, and Patricia is 8 years younger than Christy. We were a rowdy group of girls. I was roughly 3 years old, and I remember finding this really long, like, lip gloss, and it was strawberry flavored. And so I asked Christy what it was, and she said to me, "Oh, you know what that's for? That's to make your feet smell like strawberries." So at 3 years old, I'm rubbing this on the bottom of my bare feet. And come to find out, that was Mom's lip gloss.
Hopefully she didn't use it after.
She did, is what I'm telling you.
Oh, gross.
Christy was just very independent, very tenacious. When she learned to ride her bike, she spent the whole day wrecking in the backyard. And by the end of the day, she could ride her bike. And of course, her knees were all scraped and dirty, but she didn't seem to care. She had accomplished her goal.
We are at one of her favorite places on earth. It's Pratt Lake, Gladwin, Michigan, at her grandparents' lake house that she spent summers when she was a child and occasionally when she was a grown-up.
When Christy met Jason, she was 21.
When they started dating, he seemed to be good with Christy. They liked similar things. They liked rock music.
I was Christy's maid of honor for her wedding. It was one of Christy's most favorite days ever, and that's because she was the center of attention. Christy's always wanted to be married, have kids, and basically have the white picket fence, that whole story.
When Christy got pregnant, she was over the moon because this was an experience that of her dreams. It was finally happening for her.
Haley was born November 1st, 2009. Callie-Ann J was born on May 20th, 2014.
She loved it, she was happy, and that was worth $1 million right there. Is Christy happy? Then I'm happy. On September 29th, I was at my desk at work, and I got a phone call from Jason, Christy's husband. He said, "Come to the house now," and I was in the next town over. I was concerned about finding out what was going on because I had seen her the day before and she was fine. I trusted that Christy and the kids were safe with him.
I got in the car, drove to Christy's house, pulled in, parked in front of the house. There was an ambulance in the driveway. Jason was there, looking sad. So I went into the house, and Christy was laying in the bed with a blanket over her. And it was pretty much an out-of-body experience. It's just disbelief. It's literally like you're watching a movie of yourself, and it's like, how do you react to this?
I pulled up at the curb right across from the front door, and that's where Jim came out to the passenger side door and told me that Christy was gone. I got hysterical. I said, this isn't true. And I'm like, what is going on? What happened? Jason was telling me that she was in bed and she didn't wake up, and the neighbor had found her. Jason was explaining to me that there had been some problems, that when breastfeeding, he didn't know how many times he had gotten her a glass of water and she would say it tasted chemically. At this day and time, what is breaking in our news locally is the Flint City water crisis. And I said, Jason, you have well water, but you have Davison City well water. You do not have Flint well water. Your water should not be tasting chemically. I said, that doesn't make sense. I was not buying this scenario. And then it hit me, what did he do? She's healthy, she's 36. She's a breastfeeding mother. She's been going to the doctor for 9 months. And this isn't natural. This isn't natural for her not to just wake up.
How did she not wake up? It was as though I didn't know how to process that information.
My dad said, you need to come home. It's Christy. I was in shock driving and started shaking and didn't even know what to think. And so I called my best friend.
I got a call from Katrina, and I just couldn't make out what she was saying at first. It was just Christy didn't wake up. I'm like, what do you mean? Nothing made sense.
And she's like, how the F does that happen? And that sentence is what got me out of my crying, emotional, and I was able to focus. And I was like, yeah, how does that happen?
I couldn't process anything in the moment that day.
I feel like when I look back on the day, we weren't just a mourning family. We were screaming that this is not right.
My mom immediately just kind of flipped a switch and was like, okay, we got to pursue this because this didn't happen naturally.
I could not get the medical examiner to sync up with me. I'm standing there telling him she's a breastfeeding mother. She's healthy. I seen her yesterday. She wasn't feeling bad. This makes no sense. Why would a healthy 36-year-old just not wake up in the morning? And Jason is standing there listening to these conversations and participating with this conversation with the medical examiner.
There was absolutely no doubt in my mind that this was not a natural cause.
It was just wrong. Everything sounded wrong. So that's when we kind of all headed over to Jim and Kathy's.
We were all sitting here in the living room asking the questions, how could this happen?
I had been trying to figure out what's the cause. So I just said, what's everybody's conspiracy theory?
I said, before Christy passed away. She called me one day and she said Jason was texting other women. She sent me a copy of the phone record.
He transcribed all the text
I
messages.
transcribed all the text messages.
I saw the length that Jason went. I mean, Christy pulled phone records and there was thousands of texts between him and these other women.
And what did the text say?
That she was worth more dead than alive.
And I said, what happens if he had done something? There was quiet.
Even knowing that the relationship was rocky, I did not go mentally to foul play like my mom had done. I was 16 years old when I met Jason. He was introduced to us as Jay. I would go hang out at Christy's house, so I was around him more often. I would go over and play games for game nights, and they would kiss 3 times, and she would always say, past, present, future. Jason was very much a part of the family.
On outward, you seen the happy family, but Christy let me know that there were issues, and I think that was the catalyst subconsciously the day she passed away for how I responded. I remember feeling something that I never comprehended. Who goes to the police? How do you go to the police?
Finally, we actually went in on October.
Well, first to the police for the first time.
Yeah. We went to see the Davison City Police Department, and we said we think that there's foul play.
We were told that they couldn't do anything without the autopsy results.
The police officer told her that it could be as soon as 2 weeks or as long as 90 days before any answers would come, and that it just took time. But if we really felt that there was foul play, he said that we should start a notebook and we needed to keep track of any details that we thought of. Now, I don't necessarily believe that he realized who he was talking to.
So this was our version of what you would call a murder book. This is all of the info that we pulled together. So we've got in here the autopsy report, which came from the medical examiners. About 3 weeks in, the actual autopsy results came out. Davison City Police Department called us up and said, come in for a meeting tomorrow, and we'll discuss the autopsy results. So at 11/3, we found out the death was heroin toxicity.
We sat there blindsided with the chief and the detective.
She said the only thing it says is heroin toxicity. From that moment on, it was like, nope, I know for a fact she didn't do it. That's all I needed.
What was the police reaction to you guys sitting there saying she was murdered?
They wrote it down and gave us the impression that they were going to be moving forward with the investigation. That was the furthest thing from the truth. It's like a different planet. So we told them without a shadow of a doubt this was not something Christy would do. It was an instant, oh, hell no, this is murder.
The death certificate had been released, that it was death by heroin toxicity, and absolutely not. That I still say absolutely not. That's my response to that. She's breastfeeding. There is no way our sister did that. So it only leaves one person.
I didn't want to believe that he would do something like that. I mean, we're talking about a 16-year relationship. This isn't just some new random person. So how does somebody just do that?
You don't want to think that your brother-in-law is gonna murder your sister. You just don't want to mentally go there. The medical examiner said that Christy's cause of death was a self-induced overdose. And the death certificate stated accident, and it was put in a folder in a desk unworked. No one was taking responsibility, assuming it was at her own hands.
The next day, I contacted Jason because we also had 2 little girls that we needed to deal with, and one's an infant. I'd do anything to keep the girls close. Pretending with Jason is just what I had to do, because I just needed to know they were okay. I said if he wanted, we would take the baby at nights, because Christy had been breastfeeding. So the agreement was Jim and I would keep the baby during the night and bring her to daycare in the morning.
Callie spent her first year here. I'd get up in the middle of the night and feed her the bottle. The bottle with her mother's breast milk in it, by the way.
Jason brought over all of the breast milk she had in the freezer, literally like months worth of saved breast milk. Because I had been to nursing school, I always looked at the breast milk as a sample to be tested. Because it came from her body, it is evidence. That literally was the only physical evidence that we had. Because we didn't have blood from her. It wasn't like hair or anything, but it was a substance from her person.
This wasn't a situation of, pump and dump and use drugs. I mean, just because of the volume we had, and we were all confident that there was no heroin in Christy's breast milk. So we just wanted to use that as proof.
We wanted to test the breast milk, but we did not have the financial means to find an exterior lab, and we wanted to make sure that if the breast milk was tested, that it was done so that it would be admissible in court. So we had told the police that we had that. They said, I'll make note of it, but they never asked for it. I ended up with insomnia, and so I would lay in bed thinking, how can this be reality? If she died of heroin, we need proof that he gave it to her. So where'd he get it? I was awake at odd hours, and so I would spend a lot of time on the computer. Technically, I do not have any investigative training, but I am very good at research, and I have no problem utilizing Google searches to the best of my ability. I knew that Jason was working at United Plastics. The president of the company worked with Narcotics Anonymous to hire his workforce to help get guys who are trying to stay clean a good job. There's a lot of addicts working at United Plastics, so I knew his work environment could have been where the drugs had come from. The president of United Plastic was aware of all the rumors and knew a list of guys who would share information. So I started researching people and who they're friends with and who their friends are friends with.
The information that came out of that series of interviews we did with coworkers was that Jason did talk to coworkers about killing her. He asked about drugs.
Jason was asking what drugs could be not tasted if put in water. The employees did not advocate that.
One of my roller derby teammates, her brother worked with Jason, and my friend tells me the rumor at work is that he killed her for life insurance money.
Now to us, that was the green light to say this thing should really start moving. I took that to the Davison City Police Department, and the sad part is it went nowhere.
Christy's life insurance was part of her medical insurance. and she had changed her amount to be a life insurance policy of $100,000. The change was because the baby was born. Unsure who between Jason and Christy is the actual decision maker on the policy being what it was. But even after doing it, Christy believed that it was in excess. Christy had made the comment to my mom, "I am worth more dead than alive to him." We realized that the life insurance could have been the major driving forces to why Christy was deceased. I look back on the day, and I remember the viewing was on Friday. I had lines of people wanting to say, "I'm so sorry for the loss of your sister." It was very overwhelming, and I felt very a part of the community. But when heroin toxicity gets told, people didn't know. And we weren't talking about it because there's an investigation. And we're not going to jeopardize an investigation by saying my sister died of heroin toxicity, because he's obviously involved. And I don't know who all talks to who. It's a small community. We didn't want Jason to know. We knew he was involved. Jason did not seem like a grieving widow at all. He was bragging about the fact that his refrigerator was stocked full of so much food. The only way I can describe it is a manic high of, look at all the stuff I'm getting.
I recall Jason went up to one of the funeral directors and was asking about when the mail came.
What specifically was delivered to the funeral home? I guess I'm not sure.
It was the life insurance payout that I believe was $20,000. They do an instant payout, so he was waiting for the check because the funeral home would take their portion and he would have the remainder.
Yeah, and I remember he was very agitated asking about when the mail was coming.
Yes. He wanted access to those funds.
Jason made me feel very uncomfortable at the funeral home. He cornered me in like the vestibule area of the funeral home when we were leaving and basically said, "You know, you're gonna have to talk to me sometime," and he made me hug him. And I couldn't get out of there fast enough.
While we were doing all this investigating, there was one key thing that had to happen. Jason Harris could not know about this because Jason Harris had our 2 granddaughters. And we knew he was a vindictive person.
We wanted to make sure any key parts were still gathered. So we stayed very close to Jason.
Jason had no idea what was going on as far as us thinking perhaps that maybe he was involved. He couldn't have had any idea.
I know he has a very short fuse, and I was more fearful of his interactions and was afraid of what he might do to the kids or myself or any of us if he were found in an environment with us alone with him.
Kathy commented the detective and the chief blew you off when you said that insurance money was a motive. Jason says that he wants to purchase a house a couple of streets over. And he's been on an obvious spending spree.
Jason had put a down payment on a house about a block or so away from the house Christy passed away in. And so New Year's Eve, he had called and said that if we wanted the Coca-Cola collection that my mom had given Christy was at the house and we could pick it up. So my dad and I went to the house to pick up the collection, and we realized that he wasn't there. So I took advantage of the opportunity.
Electricity?
Oh, I don't know.
I videotaped a tour of the house as it stood with everything in it.
So far, I'm not finding anything that isn't what Christy bought. So pictures are still up.
I ended up finding the check stub for the life insurance policy, showing where it was cashed. I ended up finding an itinerary for flight that was to the Massachusetts area, January 2015. I realized the girl from Massachusetts was on the phone record.
When we put all these pieces together, it just seemed like there was a lot of pre-planning.
That's when I found a box in the basement. The box said, "Do not open."
Bad person. I don't know what the that is.
Have you seen this recently?
No, I haven't seen this since the night we went there.
I'm alone in the basement and I'm whispering to myself, I don't know. I'm like scared of it.
But I'm not gonna touch it.
I saw white powder and that freaked me out too because it was all over the floor. The box had drug paraphernalia in it. There was stuff on it. There's tin foil.
To us, that was like the light bulb went off.
Jason was using drugs in the basement of the house that my sister was found in.
But it's information filled in the blanks that we were trying to get the authorities to use to substantiate, to move forward, or somehow get the case more active than it had been.
And the fact that the police were doing nothing kind of stymied everything. At that point, everything with Davison Police Department basically just died.
We were frustrated with the authorities. We believed that they didn't want to admit there not being an investigation done efficiently.
For us, this is not something that would go away. It's not like a year into it, we'd just go, ah, well, you know, forget about it. We couldn't do that because at the end of this, if you don't do everything that you can do, how are you going to feel?
And so I was continuing to research everyone and everything, and my mom was emailing, trying to get anyone to listen to see about getting movement.
We couldn't think for 1 minute that he was drawing a free breath and Christy was dead. It just wasn't going to happen. So you have to keep the faith. You always have to have a hope of justice. Jason would use every opportunity he could to withhold the girls. That was his way of controlling us. So the goal here was we did not let him know anything.
I heard you're kind of like the technology guru of the family.
Yes, I'm the one that gets to hook up the printers and fix the printers, and my computer's not working right and all that good stuff. Whatever the new technology is, I like to get a hold of it and see what I can do with it. So approximately 6 months after Christy died, I get a message from Jason telling me his laptop won't boot. The real thing he wanted was all the pictures off. Well, I took that as an opportunity, and I said, well, I can take a look at it. I have some devices here at home that you basically take the hard drive out and you plug in and you can see the data, as long as the hard drive's not shot. So I was able to get access to his hard drive. I don't think Jason's a smart person. You know, you've heard that saying, not the smartest tool in the shed. He's not in the shed. He never even made it to the shed. I found a web link where you'd looked up how a couple of drugs reacted with each other with regard to if you give them to someone, and just some searches that were kind of questionable. I knew Christy would not have any reason to want to look up. Those just struck me as criminal. Started moving the pictures, and that's when I found a key picture that showed him in the basement of his house on Bay Street with all kinds of drug paraphernalia in front of him. They're having a little drug party in the basement. You know, you've got the butane, you know, lighters, and you can see the drugs on a mirror. So all that did for us was anything he wanted to say about, no, I don't do that. Well, explain this picture then.
My dad took that opportunity to copy the hard drive and tell the police, I have this computer, it's his, do you want it? Police said, yes, we want it. Can you drop it off? My parents said, no, we want you to obtain it legally. You need a warrant. So get a warrant, we'll give you the laptop. At the same time, we informed the police that we had the breast milk. So they're like, well, we'll get the breast milk when we get the laptop. So in the spring 2015, they obtained a warrant to get the laptop and the breast milk. They gathered both of those items, sent them to the Michigan State Police, and we then, for the next 3 months, the Davison City Police was telling us, we haven't heard anything, we haven't heard anything.
The reality is that hard drive was a 6-month wait in purgatory, because every time I'd go to the police department, well, we're waiting on the hard drive, waiting on the hard drive.
I ended up reaching out to the Michigan State Police and saying, what happens to the evidence? Like, how long does it take to work through? I got a call from one of the head guys at the Michigan State Police saying, we don't know what you're talking about. The Michigan State Police ended up communicating with the Davison City Police, and the laptop was found, and the Davison City Police detective didn't know how to access the files in it.
You know, there are a lot of things that you can do yourself. You can't press charges against someone. You can't arrest someone. So if you're wanting the state to bring charges against someone, you can't just go out and say, I'm going to hire a prosecutor and I'm going to, you know, go after somebody. It's totally up to their time.
The City of Davison Police Department stopped investigating because the death certificate stated accident.
You cannot expect somebody else to do it. Even if you have a top-notch police force that's just all over it, I don't think any of that means that you can just back off and let them do it. It's still something that you have to do to get the result that you're wanting at the end. That's one of the reasons why we decided to do the civil case, because as we looked into it, we realized we do control this.
We had the information of his communication with the other phone numbers up until Christy had passed. We had the search results from the laptop. We had the photograph of Jason having drug paraphernalia in front of him, and we had the video of the home showing drug paraphernalia in a box in the home that Christy was found in. We had a plethora of information, and we had the breast milk. So we filed a wrongful death suit against Jason.
Our main reason was not for the financial end of it, but to get Jason on the stand and testifying. We wanted him in front of somebody talking about the case.
We also had tried the Freedom of Information Act multiple times to no avail, and it was an avenue to get us information. We wanted to make sure there wasn't any additional evidence that was just going to end up disappearing.
I think there were people along the way that had doubt just because of the time that passed. It wasn't a matter of what evidence we collected or what information we had. It was just, okay, well, it's been 4 years, it's not going to happen if it hasn't happened already. And we just kept pushing.
With this case, civil case, we were able to push it. We were able to use subpoena power. We were able to get people in and get them to answer a line of questions that we were involved with creating. So from that point forward, we actually felt like we were making progress.
One of the depositions from a former coworker at United Plastics was that Jason hired somebody to shoot Christy and make it look like a random drive-by.
He'd ask coworkers to murder Christy. That is solicitation of murder. We listened to the deposition of Leah Miller, who's Jason's live-in girlfriend. She was saying she'd never seen Jason do drugs, and she was not aware of Jason doing drugs. And in this picture, both of them are sitting there, and it's like drug heaven.
At the end of the deposition, the medical examiner ultimately changed the status from a self-induced overdose to homicide. That felt like validation.
The civil case then goes to Jason. He has two choices. He can agree and sign it that he caused the issue, or he can say, I don't want to sign it, let's go to court, and he could get up in front of a jury. He did not do that. He signed that he was responsible for Christy's death.
So in August 2019, we got called to the state police for an update. It was in that meeting that we heard Jason Harris has been arrested and is in custody.
The three charges that he had were capital murder in the first degree, means that he planned it. Second one was a solicitation of murder. He'd asked coworkers to murder Christy. And the third was murder with a controlled substance, because it was heroin that he had given her. While there was some initial relief that he had been arrested, it was brief, because the other thing that pops into your head is, what about our granddaughters? Where are they?
Yeah, because if a jury said not guilty, we'd probably never see those girls again.
Yeah.
We really weren't safe when he was arrested. We needed to hear guilty.
We were at the trial. The Genesee County prosecutor said that they believed that Jason put heroin in her cereal and fed her cereal, which caused her death.
The expert testified and said that if it was in cereal, it would have been tasteless because the sugar would overcompensate the bitter taste that heroin has.
And the breast milk was evidence used by the prosecutor. Results of the breast milk came up clean. There was nothing in it.
And what that meant was we had proven Christy could not be doing drugs.
The verdict happened 7 years after her death. When the verdict was read, I had Patricia to my left, my dad to my right, my best friend directly behind me. And when they said the first guilty, I felt Trisha begin to cry. I felt my dad start shaking from tears, and my best friend hit me on the back, and with every single guilty, she was hitting me.
The verdict was guilty on all counts, which was very emotional. Jason Harris was sentenced to life in prison without parole. So that means he will die in the penitentiary.
It was validating. It was a rough rush of emotions. The judge said everything we'd thought and felt over the past 7 years. He got it. It was finally, after 7 years, somebody got it. I feel like justice was served.
There was always hope for justice. We never stopped investigating because the four of us, we have girls that need to be taken care of. And that is at the forefront. If I could say anything to Christy, I don't know if I would say anything. I'd probably just want to sit and watch a movie. Just be in the presence. Because it's not like I have to tell her I love her, because I know she knew it.
Christy was a mother to me at times, as much as she was her sisters, as much as she was her children, and she lived to be the mother of her children, her own children, her babies.
The biggest thing that I want to say to her is how proud I was of her as a mother, how proud I was to be her dad. I miss her. I think about her all the time. You always have to have a hope of justice. Jason would use every opportunity he could to withhold the girls. That was his way of controlling us. So the goal here was we did not let him know anything.
I heard you're kind of like the technology guru of the family.
Yes, I'm the one that gets to hook up the printers and fix the printers, and my computer's not working right and all that good stuff. Whatever the new technology is, I like to get a hold of it and see what I can do with it. So approximately 6 months after Christy died, I get a message from Jason telling me his laptop won't boot. The real thing he wanted was all the pictures off. Well, I took that as an opportunity, and I said, well, I can take a look at it. I have some devices here at home that you basically take the hard drive out and you plug in and you can see the data, as long as the hard drive's not shot. So I was able to get access to his hard drive. I don't think Jason's a smart person. You know, you've heard that saying, not the smartest tool in the shed. He's not in the shed. He never even made it to the shed. I found a web link where you'd looked up how a couple of drugs reacted with each other with regard to if you give them to someone, and just some searches that were kind of questionable. I knew Christy would not have any reason to want to look up. Those just struck me as criminal. Started moving the pictures, and that's when I found a key picture that showed him in the basement of his house on Bay Street with all kinds of drug paraphernalia in front of him. They're having a little drug party in the basement. You know, you've got the butane, you know, lighters, and you can see the drugs on a mirror. So All that did for us was anything he wanted to say about, no, I don't do that. Well, explain this picture then.
My dad took that opportunity to copy the hard drive and tell the police, I have this computer, it's his, do you want it? Police said, yes, we want it. Can you drop it off? My parents said, no, we want you to obtain it legally. You need a warrant, so get a warrant, we'll give you the laptop. At the same time, we informed the police that we had the breast milk. So they're like, well, we'll get the breast milk when we get the laptop. So in the spring 2015, they obtained a warrant to get the laptop and the breast milk. They gathered both of those items, sent them to the Michigan State Police, and we then, for the next 3 months, the Davison City Police was telling us, we haven't heard anything, we haven't heard anything.
The reality is that hard drive was a 6-month wait in purgatory, because every time I'd go to the police department, well, we're waiting on the hard drive, waiting on the hard drive.
I ended up reaching out to the Michigan State Police and saying, what happens to the evidence? Like, how long does it take to work through? I got a call from one of the head guys at the Michigan State Police saying, we don't know what you're talking about. The Michigan State Police ended up communicating with the Davison City Police, and the laptop was found, and the Davison City Police detective didn't know how to access the files in it.
You know, there are a lot of things that you can do yourself. You can't press charges against someone. You can't arrest someone. So if you're wanting the state to bring charges against someone, you can't just go out and say, I'm going to hire a prosecutor and I'm going to, go after somebody. It's totally up to their time.
The City of Davison Police Department stopped investigating because the death certificate stated accident.
You cannot expect somebody else to do it. Even if you have a top-notch police force that's just all over it, I don't think any of that means that you can just back off and let them do it. It's still something that you have to do to get the result that you're wanting at the end. That's one of the reasons why we decided to do the civil case, because as we looked into it, we realized we do control this.
We had the information of his communication with the other phone numbers up until Christy had passed. We had the search results from the laptop. We had the photograph of Jason having drug paraphernalia in front of him, and we had the video of the home showing drug paraphernalia in a box in the home that Christy was found in. We had a plethora of information, and we had the breast milk. So we filed a wrongful death suit against Jason.
Our main reason was not for the financial end of it, but to get Jason on the stand and testifying. We wanted him in front of somebody talking about the case.
We also had tried the Freedom of Information Act multiple times to no avail, and it was an avenue to get us information. We wanted to make sure there wasn't any additional evidence that was just going to end up disappearing.
I think there were people along the way that had doubt just because of the time that passed. It wasn't a matter of what evidence we collected or what information we had. It was just, okay, well, it's been 4 years, it's not going to happen if it hasn't happened already. And we just kept pushing.
The smoke is so thick and so black. The heat is intense.
There were old people screaming out in the dark, "Help me, help me."
It was a terrible scene of mayhem.
It was just something stupid, something that I wish I'd never done.
How could a person with his experience commit such a terrible offence?
Satan saying to me, it's the right thing to do.
I was reading radio news the morning that this happened, and around 5 a.m. we got an alert in the newsroom that there was a fire at Quakers Hill. My name is Jamelle Wells. I'm a senior court reporter. For more than 2 decades, I've covered some of Australia's highest profile court cases. Within about 2 hours, it was established it was a nursing home. There were people trapped inside. There were perhaps some people who had perished. It was horrific. It was so horrible to think of old people burning alive in their beds. I assumed it was an accidental fire. I think everybody did, because it was too horrible a thing to imagine someone having deliberately lit a fire in a nursing home.
The Quakers Hill nursing home is an aged care facility in the western suburbs of Sydney. Mark Tedeschi, Senior Crown Prosecutor for New South Wales. It was owned by a large company that had a number of nursing homes. It was an H-shaped building with 4 wards. We know that there were about 100 high dependency patients that were living there. They were people who were largely immobile and required constant care for their every need.
These were people who needed help showering and dressing and eating and toileting, and a lot of them couldn't get in and out of bed on their own. They needed help even to do that.
Most of the residents were elderly. Some of them had dementia. Some of them had debilitating type illnesses or things that made them disabled. I'm Rod Ameri, retired homicide detective. The residents of Quaker Hill were what is described as the greatest generation, the World War II era, where people worked extremely hard, and they were getting to that last chapter of life.
For example, there was Dorothy Sterling, who was born in 1931. She was an amazing seamstress. She would often make wedding dresses. I'm Dr. Joni Johnston, clinical and forensic psychologist and private investigator. She ended up having a huge family, including 13 great-grandchildren. She even had a great-great-grandchild. And she was really known as the matriarch of this huge family. Another, really interesting patient was Cesar Galea. He was 82 years old. He had originally been born in Egypt, where he was an expert leather maker. And then when he immigrated to Australia, he joined the police force and served there for about 20 years. And he also had just this legacy of a hard worker and somebody that his family really loved and revered him.
They were in a nursing home because their families could no longer look after them. So that was a heartbreaking decision for families to make. It was a last resort, if you like, because they needed people to lift them in and out of bed, to physically do things for them that their families could just no longer cope with.
I don't know that I've ever talked to a family who placed a family member in a nursing facility who did not feel a tremendous amount of ambivalence and guilt about it. Even if they knew it was the right thing, they know that they are leaving their loved one in the care of people that they assume and hope are caring and loving and good nurses and good providers.
They were very heavy-duty, hardcore drugs mostly given for pain relief, for old people who had chronic pain, pain after surgeries, pain from cancer. Drugs such as endone, which you must have a prescription for. It's known on the black market as hillbilly heroin. It's such a strong medication. The way those drugs are dispensed in a hospital or a nursing home is always with more than one staff member present. It's a very strict protocol. Also, there is an audit done every day of that drug cupboard. They did that audit and they noticed very quickly that more than 200 endone tablets were missing.
I mean, this is not a minor shortage. This is a huge amount of drugs has gone missing.
They noticed that the drug cupboard hadn't been forced, so someone must have accessed it with a key. It looked very odd, it looked very suspicious. They immediately notified a manager.
She redid the audit and realised that there was this large number of endones that were missing, and she called the police.
They get there and they begin their initial investigation. And then at that moment, they get another call.
After they'd been there only for about 15 minutes, they were called away to an urgent domestic violence offence that had occurred. The smoke from that fire caused the smoke detectors to be activated. The fire doors between each of the 4 wards closed, the alarm was sounded, and the message was received by the fire brigade. Very shortly after that, the fire brigade arrived. They went straight to room 19 and put out the fire. They didn't realise that there were 2 fires. It was not for about 15 minutes before they realised that there was a second fire. By that stage, the fire had really already taken hold of that room, and it was already breaching the ceiling and going into the roof space.
The smoke is so thick and so black. The heat is intense. That is a chaotic and a very frightening scene.
It is complete chaos. Firefighters, nursing home staff, they're all trying to escort their patients out as quickly as they can. But the smoke is so horrible, just like a war zone.
By that stage, it had taken hold of the wing. Residents confined to their beds and couldn't help themselves were screaming for help. It was a terrible scene of mayhem.
There were people screaming out in the dark, help me, hoping that someone would come in and rescue them.
Just the terror these nursing home patients must have felt. Imagine being in a bed, knowing you can't physically move yourself, and not knowing if anybody's going to come save you.
The firefighters described this scene as horrific. They said it was one of the most awful things they'd ever come across because of the frailty and the vulnerability of the people who were, some of them, burning alive in their beds. They could hear them, they just couldn't get to them. And some of the images are things that just will stick with them forever.
Three people died at the scene, residents, elderly residents, and 8 of them later died in hospital from their injuries, either from burns or from smoke inhalation. It was a terrible situation.
It's inconceivable what the families went through when they found out how their loved one had died, first of all, and then ultimately what caused the fire.
No one wanted to think that it was a deliberately lit fire that had caused all of this. It was very obvious to them that something was wrong here. Accidental fires don't operate that way. Fires that are in a building in two different areas are usually deliberately lit, so they straight away became suspicious.
It didn't take the police long at all to see Roger Dean as their prime suspect. He'd only been working at the Quakers Hill nursing home for about 2 months.
His main responsibility would have been to supervise more junior nurses, and crucially, he was in charge of the medical care overnight of all the residents. He was in charge of overseeing the welfare of these residents, of deciding whether or not they needed to see a doctor, making sure they were medicated properly. It was a very responsible position. It was a position of great trust from both the families of the residents themselves, and the managers of the nursing home.
He was the person who was in charge of the hospital the night of the fire.
So Roger Dean was born in 1976, and he immigrated with his mom and 3 siblings from Vietnam, where he was born, to Australia when he was still a baby. They came in as refugees. His dad died trying to immigrate later on. And so it was a struggle, I think, for his family.
He realised during his teen years that he was homosexual, and that caused conflict with his mother.
This was a source of, I think, confusion and unhappiness from his family. They just didn't really understand what that meant for him, and it really caused some rift in the family. He did well in school, even though he was teased and bullied a lot at school for his sexual orientation.
He went on, nevertheless, to study nursing at the University of Sydney, where he got his degree.
It certainly seems like Roger started out as a good nurse. He was very well trained, he was smart.
He was reprimanded by a more senior staff member for not taking proper notes about a patient, and he accused that staff member of bullying him, and that staff member soon after had nails put in her car tyres twice and paint thrown all over her car. Another work colleague found traces of white paint on Roger Dean's desk, so management put 2 and 2 together, and they ordered an investigation into his behaviour.
And so what does Roger do? He quits. That's his solution. He resigns.
The fact that Roger resolved his issue with his supervisor by creating some sort of property damage, throwing paint on a car, shows that he is a very, very different and dangerous man. He has no impulse control, and it seems that whatever anger or whatever emotion he has to satisfy it.
He is found essentially under the influence of drugs. He is mumbling, he's got a white line around his mouth, he's not very coherent, and staff is alerted. He's immediately suspended and sent home. He says he had bipolar disorder and that his treating physician had changed his medication, and the reason that he was acting so bizarrely was because of this medication. What they said was, we are going to move you to the day shift. And of course, what is the message there? We are going to closely supervise you now because we don't really trust you. And so once Roger Dean found this out, he resigned.
Because Roger had these issues or these problems, just simply left them off his resume or CV. When someone looks good on paper and there's a time period that's not accounted for, that should be an immediate red flag. But for whatever reason, none of the references or the previous employment was checked. When employers or facilities are in need of people, there are things that have to be met that are required. You have to have a nurse that has current registration and current license, and Roger had that. He was qualified and licensed to work in the facility.
When Roger Dean turned up and offered to work probably the least favoured shift, the night shift, they were happy to take him on board. He solved some problems for them.
At the same time, he was doing the very end part of a law degree at a Sydney university. So he had a lot on his plate. He was both working and studying at the same time.
Roger Dean showed up for work at about 10 p.m. that night. He was told that drugs had gone missing, but crucially, he was allowed to continue with his shift.
Around midnight, 2 police officers came to the front door wanting to get into the nursing home to speak to the facility manager. Roger Dean was the one who went to the front door and let them in.
Around 4 a.m. or so, Roger Dean told 2 junior nurses to take a break. They refused. They said, we've already had our break. So he then got another 2 junior nurses to take their break. He said, you deserve a break, go and have one now. Just before 5 a.m, alarms started going off. And then he started helping staff evacuate residents from one wing of the nursing home.
He was helping the fire brigade officers take residents out of the facility, to all appearances doing what any responsible senior nurse would do in a situation where there's a fire in an aged care facility.
He portrayed himself as a hero of the day. He introduced himself. He said, hi, my name's Roger. I'm one of the nurses here, and there was a big fire, and luckily we've gotten a lot of people out.
He was then taken to the police station, and at the police station he confessed that he was responsible for lighting the fire.
The police investigation into this matter unfolded the same day. It was very, very quick. 2 day shift nurses discovered that over 200 endone tablets were missing.
They wrote up an audit sheet and they found some of the blister packs, the empty blister packs. And they handed these over to the facility manager whom they called to come to the nursing home immediately.
So this manager went through the CCTV footage.
The nursing home had 3 CCTV cameras situated inside the facility.
And she saw on that Roger Dean going in and out of the drug room dozens of times.
There was a camera outside the treatment room and Roger Dean was coming in and going out and coming in and going out.
The fact that there was a frequent going in and out of the room 36 times, that's very odd and it's very strange.
So one of the things that really strikes me about this video is just how often he is going in and out of this room and how he tends to be kind of looking around a little bit to see if anybody is watching him. And so there's kind of a surreptitious part of it.
Roger Dean was in that treatment room for more than 2 hours. I mean, that of itself raised some suspicions. The facility manager then put the audit, the blister packs, and some other documentation into the manager's office for safekeeping and left the nursing home intending to contact the police first thing in the morning.
The evidence is starting to shape up and show that Roger is probably the likely person involved in this. No one really wants to say that Roger's done this, but all of them start to suspect that he's done it. So I think the wall started to close in on him.
It started just as a small flame, and I thought that's okay. Like, that's containable.
What strikes me about this is how innocent and kind of childlike he is in his interactions with police.
He gave a very full account over about 2 hours of what he had done in lighting the fires.
I didn't expect it to be so big. It was just something stupid and something that I wish I'd never done.
I think initially the families of the deceased 11 residents from the nursing home and those who had been severely injured in the fire was one of disbelief. How could a person with his experience and his knowledge and his level of responsibility commit such a terrible offence? Roger Dean had a very serious issue of drug dependency. He was actively stealing drugs from the nursing home, particularly endone, but also a whole lot of other drugs. So Roger Dean knew that all of the evidence of his theft of these drugs was in the manager's room. He also must have realised that If he was found out for having taken these drugs, it would not only be the end of his nursing career, but it would be the end of his future legal career. And he was that close to finishing doing law at university, and he had an ambition to switch and become a lawyer. So there were high stakes for Roger Dean. Having realised that early the next morning the police would come back and be given all this material relating to the theft of drugs and that inevitably he would be found out, he decided to do something about it.
At that point, I think he panics. And I think all he can think about is, how can I cover my tracks? How can I get out of this? What can I do to salvage the situation? And I think at that point, he starts coming up with a scheme in his mind to divert attention away from this theft onto something else.
What he did is he went into room 19, which was in A2 wing, which was unoccupied, and lit a fire on a bed. He then left A2 wing and walked to A1 wing, and he went into room 3, where there were 2 residents in that room. There were 4 beds and 2 residents, and both those residents, known to him, were immobile residents who were unable to leave their beds. And he lit a fire in that room on one of the vacant beds. So what he did was he lit 2 fires, and in between those 2 fires was the manager's room where the evidence of his theft of the drugs was located.
I think he was such a narcissist, he thought he could get away with the cover-up, and he didn't think the fires would spread. There was a lot of confusion. Staff were trying to account for everybody. Sometime later, some of the staff were then trying to go back in. Firefighters and police were trying to keep them outside.
Roger Dean spoke to 3 fire brigade officers asking to be allowed to go back into the building, to the treatment room, to retrieve the drug register. He impressed upon them how important it was that this drug register not be destroyed. The first 2 that he spoke to refused to allow him entry to the building, but the third one said, "We'll come with you and you can retrieve the drug register." So he eventually went into the treatment room, opened up the drug cabinet and got the drug register. In fact, I think he got 2 registers and put them both into a carry bag that he was carrying. He then walked out of the building saying that he had to go home to get Ventolin because he was suffering from asthma.
He left the scene with the drug registers in his bag. He then went and tore them up, destroyed them, threw them in a garbage bin outside a shop, and then he went back to the nursing home.
When police search Roger Dean's home, they are just astounded by the number and extent of his kind of drug collection.
There was something like 40 different types of drugs that were found in and around his home and his car. and 65 prescriptions from different doctors that he'd shopped around to get drugs. He was collecting hordes of tablets to meet his needs as a drug-dependent person.
They found dozens of different medications in huge quantities. Some of them were some of the endone tablets that were stolen from the Quakers Hill nursing home, but these other drugs were from chemists and pharmacies all over the place, and they were in containers marked Rogers prescription medication. They were bewildered by the quantity of drugs, the amounts that he had hoarded. They estimated that he was taking something like 15 different tablets a day. They included endones, they included sleeping pills, they included a range of other medication.
There was no doubt that he was drug addicted to a vast array of different drugs.
He answered their questions quite clearly and quite succinctly, and he stated very matter-of-factly that he thought Satan had told him to light the fires.
I just feel evil, that I'm just corrupted with evil thoughts that had made me do that. Satan saying to me that it's the right thing to do.
Typically when someone has committed a crime and they have confessed to the crime, they want to sort of not have responsibility for the things that they've done. I guess that's an easier pill to swallow than admitting to yourself that you're a terrible person.
It's another way of diffusing responsibility. It's not me, it's the drugs. It's not me, it's the bipolar disorder. It's not me, it's the devil. It's not me, it's something or somebody else.
He told police that he had depression. He said he felt like taking his own life. He was on a lot of medication, and he said that Satan had told him to do it, that he had evil thoughts, and that's why he'd lit the fires.
I just feel evil, that I'm just corrupted with evil thoughts, like Satan saying to me that it's the right thing to do.
There's absolutely no indication that Roger Dean was delusional or heard the voice of the devil talking to him or was psychotic or any of that. And yet, isn't it better to tell yourself that the devil made you do something than that you chose to do it? And that you were willing to let other people die and watch them die because you didn't want to get in trouble for stealing medication?
The Crown relied upon a category of murder which is called reckless indifference to human life murder. So the Crown accepted that he had no specific intention to kill or do serious harm, but rather that he was recklessly indifferent to the lives of the residents at the aged care facility. I think he felt that a jury composed of ordinary citizens would have very little sympathy for a senior experienced nurse who lights two fires in an aged care facility where there are immobile patients.
It would just be a lot tougher in front of a jury to get any sympathy whatsoever for Roger Dean.
The day that his trial was due to start, Roger Dean changed his plea from not guilty to guilty. It was such a dramatic moment in the courtroom. Everybody had been bracing for a very long-winded jury trial that could have gone on for months. And on the day, he just changed his pleas, guilty, 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 guilty. And as each guilty plea was entered, you could hear sighs of relief by people in the courtroom, or someone starting to cry, or someone comforting someone else in the courtroom. It was quite dramatic. The next question for us was, what sort of sentence will he be given for 11 counts of murder? Her family members told the court during Roger Dean's sentencing hearing that she was a very happy person. She danced down the corridors of the nursing home, and they said when she died, they couldn't understand why someone like Roger Dean, who they trusted implicitly to care for her, would want to kill such a defenceless and vulnerable lady. It's just something that will never leave them. At one point, when one family member was talking about how she sang lullabies to her mother while her mother was dying in hospital, that's the first time I saw any emotion from Roger Dean. He started to cry in the dock of the courtroom. He just put his head down and tears came on his cheeks, and I wondered whether that was for them or whether that was for his fear of what it would be like living in jail for the rest of his life, feeling sorry for himself.
As a result of Roger's actions and his guilty plea, he was sentenced to prison for life without parole.
The sentencing judge, she found that the offence was so horrific and so serious, and the number of deaths was so high, and his breach of trust was so great, that it was within the worst category of offences, even though he didn't have a specific intent to kill. It was because it was in the worst category that she sentenced him to 11 life sentences. And in New South Wales, life means life.
When Roger Dean was jailed for life, some family members were punching the air and shouting and jumping. They were just jumping off the ground. They were so overjoyed and happy with the life sentences that he was given. The judge who jailed Roger Dean said that these people put their loved ones in the nursing home as a last resort. It's because they could no longer look after them anymore, and there's a great amount of guilt associated with that. They then had to endure the double whammy of knowing that the people that they'd put into a nursing home were either burnt alive or died from the injuries they received during these fires. It was an ultimate breach of trust on all levels. Roger Dean was described by the judge who sentenced him as a narcissist, and by definition, a narcissist is someone who is over-obsessed with their own importance, someone who can't see beyond themselves. And I think in his case, he was worried about being caught out for stealing drugs. He thought he would lose his job. He knew he could face criminal charges, and he just did whatever it took to try to cover up his crime. He just lit the fires with reckless regard to human life or human suffering. He was just thinking of Roger Dean.
It started just as a small flame. I thought that that's okay, like that's containable.
His intention was to protect himself, to protect his future career.
I didn't expect it to be so big.
He put his interests ahead of the welfare and lives of his patients.
It was just something stupid and something that I wish I'd never done.
What keeps coming back to me is the fact that he carried it so far and that he so deliberately put people in danger. These are people who he knows, and these were people who are vulnerable and under his care.
I just feel evil, corrupted with evil thoughts that had made me do that.
I don't think Roger had any remorse at all.
Satan saying to me that it's the right thing to do.
I think he wanted to cover his tracks. I think he wanted to just get away with it. And I think he wanted to try to make himself look like a hero at one point, but it didn't quite work out for him.
The nursing home has been rebuilt, and the company that owned the nursing home has now changed its name. I think Roger Dean's murders, the 11 murders that he's serving jail time for, are 11 of the worst murders in Australia. This was a mass murder, and it was truly horrible. The Prime Minister at the time, Julia Gillard, said it was horrific. She gave her condolences to the families of those who died. She said she'd never come across anything like it, and she wanted to try to do whatever she could to ensure that nothing like this ever happened again.